Hello, everybody. My name is Nathan Beer. I am a sixth grade social studies teacher at Cambridge Heights Middle School in Patton, Pennsylvania, and welcome to our presentation on co-teaching in a virtual environment. I'm a graduate of the University of Pittsburgh, and I have 3 years of teaching experience at the middle school level. And we're going to share some various strategies on co-teaching in a learning environment for you today. Mr. Fees, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jordan Fees. Nathan and I co-teach together in his social studies class in sixth grade. I have a dual certification in early childhood and special education. The past 4 years, I've been in the sixth grade learning support position here at Cambridge Heights Middle School. Prior to that, I was able to teach in the regular education classroom at the elementary level in a fourth grade science position. Both Mr. Beer and myself were able to take part in a Google Classroom training during this summer, the summer of 2020, this past summer, and it provided very useful for us, especially as we transitioned into this virtual environment during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes.
So some of the stuff we're going to go over today, we're going to talk about co-teaching, some of the different strategies, and how that can be applied to the virtual environment.
Yes. The last fall, actually, right before the COVID-19 pandemic began, we actually did participate in a research education for teachers program in which we were to design something for students that have disabilities and require some specific accommodations. So we actually did a group project with 4 teachers. Obviously, Jordan was obviously extremely beneficial as the learning support teacher, and we actually ended up designing a pencil for students with special needs and learning disabilities. So a pretty cool experience to actually get us together to learn each other's personalities and help us become better co-teachers in the classroom environment. So let's go ahead. We're going to take you through a quick presentation on co-teaching today and then show you some of the features that has been successful for us in the virtual environment since transitioning to virtual learning and getting us through this difficult time.
Yeah, so co-teaching is it's a really important way to meet all of the needs of your students in a diverse population. I won't sit here and read for you what a definition is, but there are many approaches. So Mr. Beer, if you'll continue on the presentation, what are the different approaches to co-teaching?
Absolutely. So the co-teaching approaches, there's 6 different approaches we're going to cover briefly real quick for you and then show you how we apply them in the virtual environment. So the first one is one teach, one observe. So, and this kind of goes line in line with the one teach, one drift. So this is a teacher that is delivering instruction to the classroom environment while another offers supports and accommodations for students that might need some additional support. And Mr. Fees will elaborate on this as we go on. This is particularly, I would say, most common in math class where students, especially in the virtual environment, don't get a concept or get stuck, and there has to be some additional support offered almost on the spot while the lesson continues. So we're going to go over one teach, one drift, parallel teaching, station teaching, which we're going to offer a mock Congress session example of how we utilize that this year, some alternative teaching, and obviously the most popular, I would say, and then one of the more common practices, team teaching.
Yeah, and we'll get a little bit more into these as we go through the presentation here. Because this is a speed session, we'll try to keep it brief. So one teach, one observe. Like Mr. Beer said, one teach, one observe, and one teach, one drift are very similar. In this style or this approach, one teacher is providing the majority of the instruction while the other teacher is monitoring the students, actively supervising, looking for any student who is identified to need additional support.
Absolutely.
So usually let's get through to parallel.
Yes, parallel teaching. So in parallel teaching, both teachers are teaching the same information, but they're going to divide the class and conduct a lesson simultaneously. So I'm going to break out here for a second to show you and utilize how we use Google breakout rooms in Google Meets to conduct a mock Congress session virtually. So we were on one of our social studies units in which we cover the 3 branches of government, and we were in the legislative branch of government. And one thing that I have my students do every year is we conduct a mock Congress session. So I have my students draft mock bills, and then we get together as a mock Congress, propose them, and we go through the legislative process. So what I did here, and especially, and I'll have Jordan elaborate here on how he utilizes the breakout rooms in math class as well. But you can divide these students into particular breakout rooms and you can label them. So if I set up my breakout rooms here, I can design the number of rooms and also set a timer for when these rooms will end. So one an example of parallel teaching and how we used it, parallel teaching and station teaching, is myself, I monitored and conducted the House of Representatives. So if I labeled breakout room 1, I'll just call it the House to keep it brief. So that'd be the House of Representatives. I had a certain number of students in my breakout room. We called it the House of Representatives. We talked about the bill, discussed proposed changes to it, and then we voted on the bill. Mr. Fees conducted the Senate chamber for me, and he did the same process as I just described. So he actually discussed them with the students, proposed some problems, changes, and then voted. Then we actually came back to the main call for a joint session of Congress to discuss them as a class. So it was a pretty cool, effective strategy for co-teaching, parallel teaching, station teaching, while actually utilizing some of this technology through Google in a breakout room session. And it seemed like the kids very much enjoyed it. And we had a lot of good insight and questions and proposals from the students that were actively engaged the whole time during this lesson. So let's go ahead. Go ahead.
I want to make, Mr. Beer, if I can make a point real quick.
Absolutely.
There is some pre-planning that goes into how do you choose your groups. Depending on the lesson and the concept itself, depending on the ability of the students in your group, depending on learning styles, you can choose to group your students in a multitude of ways. The one thing is, this will take some pre-planning. You can randomly select groups, like Mr. Beer showed you there when he was determining the number of rooms in a breakout session. You could randomly split students, and we have done that. We have done that for students to work together in different types of groups, in mixed ability levels, okay, and mixed learning styles. So there are a variety of ways that you can group these students, and that all comes into how you want to attack that lesson.
Absolutely. Okay, so
yeah, so we'll move into alternative teaching. Alternative teaching is a strategy where one teacher will work with the majority of the students, okay, the students that are mostly at one particular level, and the other co-teacher is going to take the remaining students, into a smaller group to complete a different lesson. Okay, for example, let's say we were working on word problems in math and we were working on multiplying fractions. Maybe some students aren't quite ready to move into the word problems, all right, and they are still focusing on the concept of multiplying fractions itself. In this case, we could split the main teacher could take the majority of the students in the larger group and continue the strategy or the lesson, and the co-teacher with the smaller number of students could split and meet them at their instructional level.
Absolutely. Great examples there, Jordan. So the next one we're going to go to is team teaching. And this is probably the most common method out of the practices that we're going to discuss, because it happens naturally in the co-teaching environment, and especially virtually. So in team teaching, essentially you're teaching the same concept, and the teacher is offering his support and his insight during the lesson. So Mr. Fees and I, like he talked about, you really have to start to know your co-teacher's personality, teaching style, their methods, and it involves a lot of pre-planning and effective management strategies in the classroom. So one thing that Mr. Fees and I really try to do in the virtual environment is, when I'm covering something on a topic of social studies, he will come in and offer some real life examples in the virtual environment, offer some additional support, some clarification and explanation on a topic that could be confusing to a couple of students. For example, right now we're talking about the executive branch of government, how it carries out and enforces laws. And Mr. Fees was able to connect some real life examples and offer some references to how the executive branch actually enforces the law. So there was a good team teaching method. Mr. Fees and I have become very comfortable teaching with each other over the course of the last 2.5 years. And it really is starting to become like a natural environment and feeling for us. And that, I think, is the ultimate goal.
Absolutely, Mr. Beer. And I'll tell you what, one of the things that I want to touch upon as well is, you kind of mentioned it, is getting to know the personality of your co-teacher, their style.
Absolutely.
We know as teachers, we don't all have the same styles. We do differ in a variety of ways, but it's coming together and understanding how you two can work together in the same environment.
Absolutely. So right now, those are the strategies that we were going to mention on today. Another thing that we really wanted to clarify, especially in the virtual learning environment, I think we've all heard some kind of horror stories about student misbehavior. And one thing that we hold in our school district personally is that we expect the same classroom behavior virtually as if we were in the classroom itself. So another benefit of having a co-teacher, especially in a virtual learning environment, is being able to monitor behavior, and also finding out which students need some additional support in the classroom and need help. And it's always nice to have another set of eyes in that virtual environment. So for example, if I was having trouble with a math concept or a different thing, let's say I could hit my raised hand feature here, and Mr. Fees in my virtual learning environment would always be the one to track students that would need additional help or support during or throughout the lesson. And then we always had students lower their hand if their question was solved or they figured it out. So that was kind of the strategy. You want to talk about that, Mr. Fees? Go ahead.
Yeah, and actually it was really nice because there are a variety of ways that students can participate in class. So you gotta determine what your management style, your classroom, management strategy will be for this virtual environment, especially if you're in the Google Meet, application. Students can type in the chat box. They can type whatever they want, whenever they want. You must have, established rules and procedures, and sets of expectations that the students are aware of. The raised hand feature is a quick and easy way to see if a student needs something. Another thing that Mr. Beard,
okay,
you could go into and show them what it would look like when a student has their hand raised. So if you'll select the student icon at the top next to the chat box.
There we go. Let's go back right here. Okay.
So when Mr. Beer has his hand raised, as he currently does, he'll pop up under the tab Raised Hands. As he decides to lower his hand after he feels comfortable with where he's at with the instruction, he'll lower his hand and he'll go back to the main call or the rest of the group that's in the call. Another thing that Mr. Beer is going to show us is this grid view fix. This came in, and actually, Mr. Beer, if you'll allow,
I'll stop presenting, and I will allow you to do it, Mr. Fees. So go ahead and share your screen for us.
So I'll actually take you guys in and show you how to find this extension. It's a Google Chrome extension. Okay, so if I just pull up a new tab and I type in Google Meet Grid View Fix, it is one of the extensions that you can choose there. All right, if I choose that first link, it will take me here. Now you'll notice that I already have mine installed, so I don't want to remove it, but you'll just install this. Once installed, okay, you will actually be able to see up here. You're going to have a list of icons. On the far left, you'll have a tile or grid view that has a line through. Okay, that means it is disabled. If I would select that line, it would allow me to see students and everybody that has their camera showing in a grid view. This was nice because any kid that had their camera or any student that had their camera on, I would be able to see this rather the 4 small pictures that you only have on the side as a presenter.
Very good. Yep.
So really, really helpful as far as keeping students on task, engaged during a virtual lesson.
Yes, and monitoring their behavior and looking for some nonverbal cues as well, obviously in the virtual environment, with that grid view being extremely helpful to see if a student needs help or offer additional support to that particular student. Okay. All right, so another feature that I'm going to show you real quick, especially I utilize in social studies, so I'm going to go ahead and present my screen here briefly. Again, is some different activities you can also utilize, like a poll. So if you, for a reading class or anything like social studies, you could use a Q&A type of assessment. So here you can turn on Q&A, which will open questions for an open discussion board. Or another thing that's really popular that I use is a quick pulse audience to start a poll. So I can start a poll and ask a question as a bell ringer to introduce a class. I can gauge students' interest with a poll. I can see what students are feeling. So there's some variety of features that you should explore while using some of this technology, especially in Google. Now, it's going to be dependent on what your school district uses, so whether you're Google, Zoom, or another platform. But our recommendation would be to get on a meet kind of with a co-teacher like this and explore all of the features so you become extremely efficient with them and know all of the resources that you can utilize in the virtual environment. Right? You have anything else to share there, Jordan?
No, I think, being that this is a speed session, if there are any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. I know, Mr. Beer, if you could pull up that presentation, our emails are located on there. All right, so if you go back and watching this recording, you can take down our notes, our emails. Do not hesitate to contact us if you have any questions about how we're doing things here. We do have a lot more that we probably could talk about, but being that this is a condensed session, got to keep it brief.
Absolutely. And another thing that we really wanted to mention on is some types of assessments that we use as co-teachers. And I don't think you really need to overcomplicate things, but we always try to do some formal assessment at the end that obviously collects data on the students to see some of those concepts, to see what concepts some students are struggling with or gaining progress in. So we do review data at the end of our sessions, especially with attendance, obviously, and also their growth from where they're progressing in the virtual environment. So it's easy for a student to get into a bad routine and kind of, let's say, fall a little bit behind, especially in the virtual environment, if they might not raise their hand or offer additional support. Or ask for support. So one thing that we really do is try to get together on these Google Meets and go over some data and see where our students are standing and offer some support and reinforce some concepts that some students might be struggling with. All right. But with
Thanks again, everybody, for watching.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time. If, like we said, if there's any questions that you have, don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Absolutely. Anything we could help you with, we will gladly reach out and respond. Our emails are displayed. If you have any questions or concerns, I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and I hope you have a great rest of your school year.